Endure. In enduring, grow strong.
Okay. All right, I'm unmuted. Hi. Welcome. Uh am I reading this correctly? You're moving a building? Like an entire to get a building, like move an entire building? But hi. And yeah, congrats on first. Hi Vessel. And hi everyone. Welcome, welcome. Um I'm a little bit bewildered. Music. I wanted some music. I really need to prepare some more playlists. I have a couple of them, but they're not not necessarily amazing. Okay, let me check. I just double click this. Will that open the player? It will. That's very loud. I apologize. Okay, there we go. Um, yeah. But yeah, I feel the tired. Definitely feel that. I'm also, yeah, not doing well. It's really wild. Last week was super hot over here. It was 30 something degrees. Like it hit like 31, 33, and so on. And then over the weekend, just like that, uh it dropped. It dropped by 10 degrees. It's now 21. And it's raining constantly and like ugh. So that's definitely not been playing well with my body's going like, oh, finally, summer, I can start turning up all of the heat adaptation and such, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, nope, we're getting humid, cool days now. So that's great. Uh, but yeah, I hope everyone's doing better than me. That your weekend has been better. My weekend has been messing up my sleep schedule again. So, I hope that this week I can get it under control. Yeah. That said, we are here today. So I made a post on Blue Sky asking about tips or just discussion and such for running RPGs, running and prepping RPGs, because I've noticed that during my game design streams, or also just like when playing RPGs, when playing things like Baldur's Gate, I tend to talk about this just on the side, talking about, oh, this is a sign of good prep, or oh, you need to, or you not need to. There's never a you need to. You should, or you could look for that, or like try to incorporate these things, right, when prepping your sessions, etc., etc. I don't know, it's just some side discussion happening here and there, and then we go back to the main thing. And then I thought, you know what, would people actually be interested in, oh come on, is my mouse broken again? Okay. um would people actually be interested in, like, only talking about prepping and running TTRPG sessions? No, because again, I see this a lot. Like, there's a lot of uh others, like including VTubers out there, who are all like, "Oh yeah, I enjoy TTRPGs. I want to play, or I've played a bunch." And then a lot of questions as well. It's like, but how do I? It's like, oh, it's my first time running, or I don't know what I'm doing. You know, uh, I or stories of like, oh, I prep 8 hours. I'm in my 8th hour prepping for this week's session. And the session is slated to last like 3 hours. Okay. Do you enjoy the 8 hour prep, or do you hope it could be less? Are you burning yourself out? Because that is a surefire way to burn yourself out. Um, a lot of things like that. I just thought, you know what? There could be interest. And so my post on Blue Sky actually got a fair bit of traction. I thought, you know what? There's enough people who might wish for a topic like this. Um, that yeah, sure, let's do this. So instead of having it just as a side topic, have it as the primary topic of how to run and prep a TTRPG session. Okay. There's something I cannot forget to do later. Let me just note that down real quick. Something completely unrelated, but I keep forgetting to do it, so I need to write it down on a to-do list right now. Okay. Now, I don't have. This is not a presentation today. Like this is not some sort of step by step guide of, oh, this is what you do, this is what you do after, and this is how you prep properly and such. There's, again, it's a creative outlet a lot of times, right? It's a creative outlet and a hobby, and if people enjoy prepping for 8 hours because they like going into world building and thinking of characters, or even like mathing out stat blocks or things like that, sure, that's a good hobby. um but for people who don't want to do it like this, and are intimidated or overwhelmed by how much it seems to be, like how much things there seem to be to do for prepping, this is for you, right? So it's, and because it's a creative outlet, there is no like one size fits all, this is how you're supposed to do it, right? we're not we're not operating machinery here, or anything like that. We're not building a bridge going, yeah, if you don't do it like this, then physics happens and the bridge collapses, um this is these are more like helpful tools and like guidelines and tried and true experience, more than you have to do it this way, and there won't ever be any you have to do it this way, right? um so let me just save this real quick. Get a board up. Okay, and then let me switch to here. Actually, I want to do some different music. Hold on, this music. Uh, there we go. Okay. If the music is too loud or too quiet, please let me know. All right. Now. Okay. So, and this is also, just by the way, an open Q&A session. So if there are any questions, there are any like points of discussion, if you have any ideas or anything you want to ask, etc., feel free to do so. This is not a lecture, right? I'm not here to lecture you how to do this. More like this is just, we're just here sitting around a table discussing things. Okay. So let's begin with prepping. But okay, actually, prepping and running, let me put both in here because they're both related, right? How you prep your session determines how you run it, and how you run it determines what you need to prep. Okay. Sorry, my eyes are a little bit uh funky. I accidentally got some Tabasco into my eyes yesterday, and I think they're still a little bit irritated. So, excuse me if I need to I can't stare at the screen for a little bit here and there. Okay. Like I said, I hope your weekend has been going better than mine. Tabasco in the eyes is also something that happened. That is a horrible line. I can do better. That is still horrible. That is slightly better. Okay, good enough. Now, so where do we start? The first thing is looking at partially conventional wisdom, and I use that term very carefully, not carefully, but like very in lieu of a better term. So there's basically, how do I even prep for a session, right? And many times there's no good guides, or a lot of like things like the Dungeon Master's Guide, the D&D Dungeon Master's Guide is like Pettigrew conventional wisdom is very close to stereotypical. Yes, so it's basically like things that are being done because everyone else does them. And hello, hi Pettigrew, welcome, welcome. Yeah, it's like where do you learn, right? A lot of this is kind of like oral tradition in a way. You just, so I appreciate that you tread carefully on the topic. I mean, I try to cover all bases in this sense because again, there is no correct way to prep and run a session, right? It's all about, at the end of the day, it is all a creative, right? And if your players enjoy it, if you enjoy it, then it's not wrong, right? But there are instances where you just don't know better, right? Where you don't know what you could be doing differently, and the only way you know how to prep or run a session is starting to burn you out, or is becoming too big and too intimidating, or you might miss things that you hadn't considered, things like that. And this is where such tools and such advice, I guess, might come in handy, right? So a lot of prep comes from looking at, well, how do the pros, quote unquote, do it? And by pros, usually people turn to things like published adventures, right? You might look at a published adventure and say, all right, so this is how I'm supposed to prep my own adventures, right? I need to write an entire book, well, or write a chapter at least, right? And I need to plan out encounters like this, and I need to read aloud
Updated my
text,
journal.
and so on. Oh, thank you for the follow. Follows are anonymous. Also, I'm not seeing the alert pop up. Uh-oh. Okay, something broke. Hold on. Why? But yeah, if you do wish to announce that you follow, you can do that. Otherwise, you can lurk, chat, do whatever. Let's see.
Updated my journal.
Okay, the sound is coming through, the chat message is coming through, but the alert is not. Why is it not coming through? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Why is it broken? So the image exists and it's not a problem. Is it the integration that's broken? Dang. Why do everything keeps breaking? Things keep breaking all the time and it sucks. OBS. It's disconnected. That explains a lot. Okay, something broke again, and it's not connected to OBS. Uh, okay. Sorry about that. Let me you know what? I'll fix it over the ad break. I'll do it then. Um yeah, but it's not connected to OBS. Okay. Right. Right, where was I? Prep. Right, so it's a lot of times like there are no good sources that teach you how to prep, and trying to kind of reverse engineer how prep works by following published material leads to like a whole just a big mess of things, right? Also because I do think a lot of the published adventures, especially I'm talking about D&D mainly, but I do think a lot of the published adventures are not great, especially in the way they are presented and in the way they might have been, or in the type of prep they inspire. So, and there's just no methods or tools being taught and going like, well, how do I do this then, right? And it's more this lack of knowing how to go about it that is a big stumbling block for people, I believe. So when looking at prep and running, these two things are intricately tied, mainly because uh, when you are running your game, uh, how you run your game and what you include in it determines what you need to prep. May I ask, do you recommend following a published campaign to the letter? No, definitely not. Um, Especially the D&D ones. But I've also seen a bunch of other campaigns being published here and there where I just go, why is this? Like I saw a campaign get like a lot of like 5-star reviews and such, and I just read through it and go, this is not a campaign. This is not helping me. But get back more precisely to your question. It's essentially the campaigns that have been published so far. A lot of them are uh what's the word? I mean, of course, yes, I do think they're bad. And a lot of times they are like it's a lot of it is the presentation that is bad. It's not necessarily the content, even though that suffers as well, depending on which specific campaign. I mean, there's like what by now 12 or 13, 14 of these campaigns that have been published. Right? So that's and they vary greatly in quality. So you can't just say they're all bad. But what is usually bad is the way these campaigns are presented, because um, the way the material is written in the book is usually for someone who reads the book and not for someone who wants to use it to run the game. So basically, when you um when you present material, right, depending on who your target audience is, there are different ways to sort the material, to phrase things, to present it in different ways and such. And a lot of campaigns, and it feels like some of the Pathfinder adventure paths and such that I've been reading through as well follow the same principle, which is the target audience, paradoxically, is not game masters hoping to run this at their table. The target audience is people who want to read a good story in the format of an RPG adventure instead of like a novel, right? So the way they present information is to make it exciting for someone who's just reading this like a story. And when that is your target audience, the way you present the material is very, very different because you want to surprise them. You want to have twists in there. You want to build suspense and so on, right? All of these tricks of storytelling. Whereas if you um want to present material for someone to use it to run the material at the game table, you need to write it more like a recipe, right? Or an instruction manual for, I don't know, assembling furniture, or something like that, where there are no twists and surprises. Otherwise, you go like, oh yeah, put this together. Oh, and here's the board, and then you screw that. Surprise! There was a washer you had to include first, right? And it's like, wait, what? But I've already screwed everything together. Why are you telling me to this now, right? Um, and that's how a lot of these adventures function. Um, and this presentation makes them bad for game masters, which is why there is now this expectation, and it's horrible that this expectation exists, but basically this expectation that when you buy this $60 campaign book, then you still have to spend hours and hours and hours into it to prep the material for yourself to run, right? You can't just run it using the book. And that's it. That's horrific, right? That is basically saying this was not made for you. This was not made for the game master. This was made for the reader, right? Um, Now, obviously, when I buy an adventure book, especially a big one that covers an entire campaign, I don't expect to be able to just crack it open very first time ever at the table and run it. Like, no, I still have to read things, obviously. But I'm hoping that that is all that's necessary, right? Just me reading through, I don't know, the intro chapter, and then whatever stage of the campaign we're planning to get to tonight, right? If we're starting out, I just read the first chapter of the campaign, or maybe even just the first part of the first chapter, and then that's it, right? Now I know what's in the book, and then I can just use the information as presented in there, and maybe, I don't know, a handful of notes here and there for myself, um, to run it. But that's not what we have, right? What we have is I need to reorganize everything. I need to extract relevant information and basically write a second book for myself based on the first book that I bought, and that's what makes them bad. Um, like content wise, some of them are, I don't know. I haven't read all of them, and I've definitely not played any of them. Um, but the content quality from what I have seen from like the bits and I've read myself from various reviews and discussions are, it goes from absolutely horrible, never touch, to this is actually pretty fun, right? So that varies a lot. I would argue a good GM would read the entire book, run the entire campaign through in their mind, basically practice it a few times before you engage with players. I mean, Yes. Um, yes, obviously the more you prepare, um, the more of a grasp you have. Is that expecting too much? Um, too okay. I'm coming to this at this from a different perspective. You're not necessarily wrong, right? Yes, there is a certain uh qualifier for GMs where you can say, yes, I will read through the entire thing to understand exactly everything that's happening. And like run the campaign through your mind. I guess. Um, I guess it depends on how everyone wants to visualize what might happen at the table and such. Okay, I but I don't feel that's necessary from the opposite perspective. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of the person creating this material, right? So usually I do game design, and also like when it comes to game content like this, I want to create content. I want to create adventures or games and such that don't require the GM to do this, right? Um, Essentially, to use horrible phrasing, content that can also be run by bad GMs, right? So yes, there is also the side of being a good GM and prepping things in a certain way, right? And saying, uh, I'm going to go beyond the material and uh do do certain things to elevate the game even further, right? I will practice, and there's a lot of things you can do, right? I will put together the perfect playlist for music. I will practice voices. I will search for images for all the NPCs that appear in there. I will um take copious amounts of notes for my campaign and such. There's a lot of things you can do in there. Uh and to really elevate the game. Um, and these can definitely make the game more enjoyable. But I'm coming from the perspective that this is extra, right? And um, you shouldn't have to expect someone to do this, especially not as the person who is writing writing adventures. You shouldn't have to expect that when you put out an adventure for other people, um, that the GM is going to go through all of that, right? That the GM knows how to go through all of that or has the time and energy, right? Um, some of the best adventures I've ever run, some of the best campaigns I've ever run, all of the material I needed was in the book. It was a Blades in the Dark campaign. And basically, my preps are mounted to 15 minutes before the session, thinking about what happened last session, where are we now, what might happen. It's 15 minutes before each session. And that's it, because everything else was there for me, and I could just use the book to run the game and use the system, really. Run the game, use the game system to run the game without having all of that extra prep. Now, I do have to say I've been running games for a long time. So I guess some of that was in there, but again, I don't expect like you needing something like an hour, 2, 3, 8 hours of prep um to run a session. If someone wants to put in 8 hours of prep and they're enjoying it and they have the time and energy for it, okay, sure, then that's their hobby. Prepping games becomes a hobby in and of itself. Um, but that should never be the expectation, right? So that's the perspective I'm using to that I'm coming at this from, right? saying, I want to create things and I want to give people tools, even if they aren't a great GM. Like that's a horrible qualifier, but kind of like what is it? Critical Role, right? Matt Mercer has said in interviews that he spends 3 hours prepping for every 1 hour at the table. Right. So if their session takes something like 3 or 4 hours, he preps 10 hours for it. Um, but that man clearly enjoys what he's doing. He's getting paid for it, right? It's his job. So he can spend that time. He can put in that time and be fine with it, right? Not everyone has that luxury. So um this whole discussion that I'm doing today is basically, if I only have half an hour to an hour every week to prep a game, what can I do? Right? What should I prep? How should I approach it? To make sure that I don't flounder at the table. But also to make sure that, we're all having a good time. And yeah, there's much more to this discussion of actually playing at the table. There's also being a good player at the table. That's a thing no one ever touches on. It's like it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not just the GM feeds you things. You as a player also need to be engaged, and you know there are signs of a good player and signs of a bad player, very much. So that's a huge discussion. It's a great topic for conversation. Oh yeah, definitely. I agree. It is. Um, and there is a lot in there, and very little of it is actually um like displayed as a guide and such, right? Very little of it is present in things like Dungeon Master's guides or such. Um, and it's a shame because I do feel like the idea of, oh, if I want to run a game, I need to read the entire rule book. I need to remember every single rule. I need to read the entire campaign book and remember every single little thing that was said in there. And then people just don't, right? Because it's such a huge mountain. And it doesn't have to be. The guides really do expect DMs to figure it out on their own. They really do. Yes. Um if you do want a relatively good Dungeon Master's guide, that does go into more depth on this whole issue. The Dungeons and Dragons fourth edition Dungeon Master's guides, 1 and 2, both of them, are some of the best I've seen. Um, are they absolutely excellent and cover everything? Of course not. But compared to like the third edition guide or the Pathfinder guide or the fifth edition guide and such, um, the D&D fourth edition DMGs are really, really, really good. And they have a lot of good ideas in there that you think like, wait, what? Why has no one ever talked about this on in a bigger game? Right? This is amazing advice. So I do recommend those two if you want them in a book form like that. Um, the D&D fourth edition ones are quite excellent. Um, but yeah, so I'm here to tell you basically you don't have to read the whole thing, and especially a huge campaign like this. This was not so I was not so, like I didn't plan on talking about the campaigns, pre-published campaigns, because those are a whole different beast, right? How to prep them and such is a completely different thing. This is more about your own ideas you just writing your own adventures or just running your own little sessions, your own games. People call them homebrew, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird term for me to use on this. But yeah, and how do you approach that, right? How do you make sure you don't burn yourself out on prep? Um, and I think there are two big things that I think beginner, or not just beginner, but a lot of game masters feel like they need to do. And they're kind of sort of on a spectrum, and they both stem from the same kind of fundamental understanding of the game that I feel like hinders a lot of running and prepping of these games. So what the heck am I even talking about? How do I phrase this? So there's um the following the story, and on the other hand, it's kind of sort of like a spectrum, is the choose your own adventure. And you definitely have my attention. Okay, okay. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so what is happening here? What I feel like a lot of dungeon masters or game masters, what they have is a lack of paradigms. So they only know, and this is not their own fault really, because again, there are precious few resources teaching this or discussing this at all. So really, it's a, well, how can an adventure look, right? And then the only things they can really draw on is things like static media, movies and novels, etc., TV series very often, or kind of sort of more video games, or the really old ones here and there know the choose your own adventure books and such, right? Um, and those are kind of the two forms of media that dungeon masters have to draw upon. And then they say, okay, if I prep my game, if I want to prepare an adventure or so, these tend to be the styles that I can go into, right? um but both of them are flawed when you're looking at them from the lens of a tabletop role-playing game, right? The static medium, quite obviously, it's static, and that is definitely not um what a TTRPG is. When you're playing at the table together with other people, the game is anything but static. It's constantly changing. There's die rolls in there that help determine the action and its outcomes for you, so you cannot ever plan what is going to happen. Um, really, right? So looking at a static medium where everything is scripted out, where you can craft very careful tension curves and do like very precise foreshadowing or like setups and payoffs and etc., and have every character do and say exactly what you want them to lead the story to a certain conclusion. You cannot do that in a TTRPG, right? But that is one of the big things that game masters have to look at. The other side is the more choose your own adventure type, which is found in a lot of video games, actually. Like video games function in this, and which is you have some sort of situation, and then you choose one of, I don't know, two or three possible courses of action, and then you choose that, and that leads you to another situation. And then again, you're given a choice, and you choose one of them, and so on. So that's a trap I fall into. I'm an overthinker, so I blame this, but I do very hard to anticipate every player's action to have a plan for it happening. Yes, exactly. And that is um I want to call that a flawed paradigm. And again, not not anyone's fault, right? Because we're not told this. We're not taught any of this. This is just what we have around us, but that's not how flawed and time consuming. Yeah, very much time consuming, right? So following the story is let me use a different color. Is basically this idea of you have this scene, then you have this scene, right? And you have this scene and so on. Like kind of like this, right? A very linear story. And then choose your own adventure, right? Is like this, right? Where you have these choices appearing, and then every choice can lead to a different scene, etc. You know the drill, right? And a lot of video games and such function kind of like this, right? Or a combination of this, um, where certain parts are perfectly linear and you can only go through in that way, and then you're given a choice, and that choice leads you to one of two possible outcomes or things like that, right? And then you follow on from there. And sure, every now and then you might get like convergence, etc. Especially close to the finale, you might get like convergence happening where everything leads to the same finale, etc. Blah blah and so on. But general idea, right? Now, where is this flawed? Um, I don't. I'm hesitant to call things outright wrong because again, creative medium. You're playing at your table as long as you're having fun. It's not wrong. It's too strong a word, but this can hamper. This kind of thing can hamper your prep and your running and perhaps the enjoyment at the table. Um, but they are fundamentally the same kind of idea, right? You have this thing, and then you follow to a next scene, and you follow to next scene, and so on. And the difference is really how many branches do you prepare, right? But fundamentally, these two follow the same basic paradigm. And if you only have one branch here, well, you get to a very obvious problem. You get to railroading, right? And these two are fluid. We'll see in a moment. You get to railroading because it's like, okay, if I have scene A, and then that scene A must lead into scene B, well, then the players have to do a certain thing. They have to agree to accept the quest, or they have to talk to this person, or they have to, I don't know, activate a magic item, or whatever. And if they don't do it, then it doesn't lead into scene B, and then my entire prep collapses. Okay, how do I prevent this? Well, maybe I can choose. Railroading is a big issue. Yes, often misunderstood, but it is a big issue. Um, right? So I can think, okay, well, if they don't talk to this person, maybe they can talk to that person instead. And then it might fundamentally lead to the same scene, so I get something like this. Or if they say, well, if they agree to the quest, then I go to this scene. If they don't agree to the quest, then they go to that scene. Um, and then we start getting this kind of deal, right? So this is fluid. I can start from one or the other and say, well, usually you start with following the story, right? You have a story in your head. You say this is how the adventure is going to go. But what if they choose differently over here? Well, then I need to prepare a different scene or an encounter or a moment or whatever what you want to call it, right? For them. Okay. Well, let's head back to the original. What if they choose differently here? Well, okay, then I need to prep something here as well, and then I need to prep something here as well. Okay, then what if I'm here now? Well, then I need to prep something here, and suddenly you get the choose your own adventure tree, right? So a lot of prep flows between these two states, I feel. So they are definitely related. Um, so if you want to avoid railroading, if you're aware enough that you say, yeah, okay, I don't want to just push them along each scene and just have them do what I need them to do or bend things like that or disallow choices so that I can go to the next scene. well, then I need to prep for every eventuality. But when you get to this stage, what happens here is you have over prep. And very, very conscious over prep. Because if you look at it, if you say just follow kind of this route through here, right? That's 5 scenes that you're going to hit. And you have here something like 15 scenes, 20 scenes, even more, that you are not using. So you are very consciously saying, okay, I'm going to prep for 8 hours, and something like 6 hours of my prep will be wasted. And I know going in that 6 hours of my prep will never come to light, will never happen. I will write and stat out and script out 6 hours worth of encounters, and they will never appear in the game. Yeah? So that's the over prep. So you're prepping things knowing that you're just going to throw them away. And that's doing yourself a disservice, right? Again, if you enjoy writing choose your own adventure, things like that, then it's all good. But if you only have an hour a day or an hour a week really to devote to prepping a session, you cannot do this. Right? You simply don't have the time and energy to do this. And then you might fall back to following the story and just only include a certain branch here and there, maybe for cosmetics. But then when you're running the session, you run into railroading. So this is not the solution. But these are the only paradigms that most GMs are given, right? So what do? We have to change the fundamental thinking. We have to change the paradigm, right? And this is something that a lot of GMs, they might be dimly aware of it, but they're afraid to take the plunge, or some GMs might not actually understand that this is the case, that this is happening. But essentially, you use the unpredictable, collaborative, dynamic nature of a TTRPG and just roll with it. What does that mean? Don't prep stories or plots, whatever you want to call them, right? Don't prep stories or plots. You only prep the situation. Prep the situation. What does that mean? So, for example, and this is a lot of where playing the world naturally comes in, and it shifts the focus of what you prep, right? So instead of prepping a whole bunch of different scenes of like, oh, first we do this, then we do this, then we do this, you prep situations and the people and the backstory and so on, and then you just let the players loose, right? So you do things like, all right, say they have an audience with some king, right? The party did some adventures, they have an audience with the king, and then you say, all right, so the king asked them to do a certain quest for them because they're now heroes of the land, and it's like, oh yeah, we have this big problem, I don't know, a demon cult, blah blah, standard stuff. Will you please help us? I'll pay you a lot, or I'll give you a small castle somewhere, really awesome. And then you prep your 2 branches saying, okay, so the players could accept the quest, or they can decline the quest, and then we can kind of go from there, right? You choose your own adventure. And then suddenly the players say, you know what? I attack the king. I want to murder him and take his crown and rule his kingdom now. And then you go, hold on. I never thought of this possibility. What now? I don't have anything prepped for it. I don't know what's going to happen. The reason you don't have anything prepped for it is because you're only thinking about outcomes, not causes, right? So you were thinking in these arrows here. You were thinking in these things. You weren't thinking in the causes of who is in the scene, what is actually happening. So it's like, okay, if they want to attack the king, do I allow this? You might say, well, no, you can't actually attack the king. He's sitting too far away. Or, oh, there's a, I don't know, whatever. You don't have your weapons. I didn't mention this before, but they took all your weapons before you stepped in front of the king, blah, blah, blah. You start railroading, right? Um, because you don't want this to be a possible outcome because you don't have a scene prepared for the outcome. But if you say, well, okay, let's roll with it. Let's roll with it, right? They want to attack the king. Why? Doesn't matter for now. You don't care about what the players think. They just told you they want to attack the king. That's good enough for you. Now you think about, okay, what does the king think about this? What do the guards think about this? Does the king have like a king's guard there? Probably, right? It must be like, I don't know, 2 or 3 people always there when the king is sitting on his throne. Um, are there other people in the room? Well, think about what you described. Think about how you explained the scene to your players. There might be other people in the room, right? And so on. How powerful is this king? Is it possible he has a magic item to protect him? Is it possible he has a court wizard or so who is also there to protect him? And so on. And then you go, all right, roll your attack. Just check, roll your attack, and then you roll an attack. Um, and then you say, all right, and now all the Kingsguard suddenly draw their swords. Uh, you hear magical chanting coming from the back of the room. All the people in the room start screaming and running around wildly. Do you want to roll initiative and have this combat happen? Right? Because all of a sudden, there's a big, chaotic, messy combat against some pretty, like, sizable bodyguards and even a court wizard who is now, doing things before it's your next turn. And, well, what is going to happen? Well, maybe they do kill the king. What now? I don't know. Was the king a despot? Maybe the people are really happy and hail them as saviors. Maybe the king was beloved. Okay, well now there's gonna be a big revolution happening. Um, but there's a lot of potential here, and it is impossible to prep for all of this. But if the players want to go down that route, and you prepped all of these other things beforehand, right? Who is the king? How is he? You don't even need to go like, how is he protected? You don't even need to go into that detail, but you could say like, oh yeah, the king is a harsh despot and he always fears for his life. Um, and that already gives you enough info to kind of improvise saying, yeah, that probably means he always has good protection. He never steps on his throne without full armor, right, etc., etc. Because he fears for his life, and because you prep that one little sentence, that gives you enough to improvise where the scene is gonna go, right? And this is the shift in perspective that I'm talking about. Right? It's not about thinking about possible player actions and their outcomes. It's about building a situation and then just handing that to the players and go, all right, go wild. This is your China shop. Now be the bull inside of it. Right? Um, and that can make things very exciting for you and for the players. And it solves a lot of the problems, right? Because you only prep what you need to, and the players do feel like they have freedom and that their actions and choices have consequences. All right, an ad is going to hit very very soon. Let me hop here real quick. I'm not gonna. So what I usually do is I don't uh continue with the main content during the ad. But for now, I'm gonna sit here and try to fix my streamer bot issue because holy heck, it keeps breaking. So yeah, remember to fix your alerts. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Settings. Let me see. I believe advanced. So somehow my streamer bot is no longer able to connect to OBS. So I need to see where it went wrong. Stream, output. Hmm. I don't actually see tools. Ah. Profile. Wait, is it?
Endure.
There's no profile
In
loaded.
enduring, grow strong.
Is that the problem? I don't even remember. Um. Do. Projectors, output, appearance. Could it be the stream password or something changed again? I don't know where to find it. Recording network. Huh. I feel like I was able to fix it last time, but I don't see it anymore. Dates. No, everything is up to date. Hmm. Okay, let me Google this real quick. Can't connect to OBS. Let's see. OBS connect. WebSocket server settings. I see. That's where it is. The port changed. That's odd. Hey, Vitalina. Hello. How are you doing? Hey, okay. Got it. It's reconnected. We're saved. Perfect timing. Ads are over now. Okay. We're back. We're back. Okay. Not today. But yes. Okay. So the port where all of the bots and such connect into OBS, that changed. The IP address changed. Very, very slightly. But that means it couldn't connect. But it should have been fixed by. Let me just test it real quick. Let me do another follow test.
Updated my journal.
Aha! There we go. There's the alert. Very nice. Okay. Whew. All right. So we were talking about the paradigm that most GMs are familiar with that, however, can overwhelm them in their prep, right? So this is the whole. I try to think of every possible thing the players could do and plan for that eventuality. That leads to the choose your own adventure over prep, right? Because realistically, you can't really do that, right? Like I said, it's like, oh, you have the audience with the king. You accept the quest, you decline the quest, and then they suddenly say, okay, wait, hold on. What if they attack the king? What if they do something completely different, like I don't know, activate a certain magical item that they have, and I've determined beforehand that if they activate that item, a demon portal opens, a demon start pouring out. What then? Right? I need to remember that they have that item at all times because that's, I don't know, I gave it to them for some reason at some point, blah blah blah, and so on. I don't know. What if they try to seduce the king? Uh, what if they won't talk to the king and will only talk to, I don't know, someone else who's present? There's a lot of different things, and you cannot possibly prep for everything, right? Um, and if you do try to anticipate every possible action, you know they're only going to pick one, and all of the other things are then wasted. So, prep plot. Don't prep plots. Prep situations, right? How do you do this? Well, you have to think of your game not in the sense of a story. The story is not the thing you prep. So let me write that down over here. The story is not the thing you prep. It's what happens at the table. And again, this may have been like this kind of idea may have been thrown around at the table. Um, but what does it actually mean, right? And I'm not talking about sandbox. I'm definitely not talking about sandbox. That is a completely different thing. Um, so it's not, oh, either I have to prep a choose your own adventure thing or railroad, or I have to prep a sandbox, which is also like, oh my god, I cannot do that. I have to spend like 3 months prepping it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that. Okay. So what do I actually mean by this? It means you could definitely have a linear story happening, with a clear path from A to B, but what happens in there is completely up to the players, right? So essentially, um, sorry, man, I distract with a quick question. Will this VOD go onto YouTube? Yes, it will. I tend to upload all of my VODs onto YouTube. Um, there should be a YouTube link in my about page. I don't know if I have. Oh, hey, I also have that. Okay. Yes. So I will upload this. If I don't get to it today, I'll do it over the course of the week, but it will be on there. Um, very cool. My internet's being problematic, so I'm just gonna watch it later. Thank you. Okay, yeah, no problem. No problem. And yeah, thank you for your interest and for the discussion. Yeah. Okay, so where was it? Yeah, so what you prep is not how do I go from A to B. What you prep is just A. Basically. Right? That's basically what I'm saying. So, what is included in the situation, right? What sorts of aspects do you need to think about? Well, you need to think about the background. So things like, how did we get here, right? Um, what happened before that led us to this point before the players intersect and start mucking about, right? What has come up to this point? Um, Maybe there is a some sort of political intrigue, and the minister, some sort of minister, has been plotting to overthrow the king for the last year. Doesn't mean you need to write out the entire last year of exactly what happened, right? That's not necessary to understand. You just need to have some things like, okay, maybe why does the minister want to overthrow the king, right? Does the minister believe the king is evil, or just lust for power? You know, that kind of motive can change the context of the eventual story a lot. Um, what sorts of resources does the minister have? What have they already put into action? Have they hired spies to check on the king's routine? The minister was radicalized at Isaiah Skybreak show. Down with the monarchy. Was it Mundo Sine Caesaribus? Right, that kind of deal, exactly. Um, right. Has the minister hired spies to spy on the routine? Maybe decided on a plan of action, like poisoning, for example. So they need to get in touch with a poisoner. And make sure this poisoner will not rat them out to the king. That kind of deal. Um, and so on. Like, what does the minister have? Like, how deep into the plans is this going? Um, is the assassination going to happen next week, right? Or is the minister taking their time and just saying, better be careful, so there's going to be a month or two before something happens. So that also changes the thing. It's like, does it become like an action packed, we have to save the king now, or does it become more of an investigation of something's rotten here in the state of this place, whatever you want to call it, um and such. It, again, changes the context of the adventure. But these are all things you think of, right? Is there anyone else involved? Is there someone who's already on the trail, right? Did someone sniff something out and be like, oh, the king's life might be in danger? Maybe this person comes to recruit the adventurers or mentions something to them, right? um is it a general rumor saying like, oh yeah, the king and the minister, they do not like each other? There's a lot of distrust, but the minister's very capable at their job. So king keeps them around for now. And then the players can go, aha, that way adventure lies, right? Something like this. And there is no harm in like putting hooks out like that and trying to hook your players. Um, that is not railroading. And to a certain degree, that is also being a good player. If you see a hook, try to go for it. Um, Try to get hooked, because you made an adventure. You are playing in a game with the general agreement that we are a party of heroes that will go on adventures. And then the GM waves a flag in front of your face saying, this is the hook, this is the hook, this is where the adventure is, this is where all my prep went. And then you go, nah, I want to chat with the random goblin at the tavern. What are you doing? That's not where the adventure is. Uh, that's not the thing you agreed on to do. I hope you agreed on something to do, right? That's not the kind of, let's have heroic adventure, and then heroic adventure pops out and says, ta-da, I'm here, and then you go, actually, I don't want to do heroic adventure after all. Um so yeah. Railroading to me is something that has to be solved one way, i.e., one path. Hi, awkward pain. Welcome, welcome. Um, yes, it's um, I would use a slightly different phrasing. Um, but I'm just jumping in, so I might be missing something. No. You are correct. I would use a more stringent phrasing. Railroading is when there is no player agency, right? Problem with that is it uses more like words that I then have to define. But it's essentially if player choice doesn't matter, or if player choice is not allowed, then that's railroading, right? Because you look at that and go, yeah, okay, I'm on railroads. There's no way I can jump off the rails, right? And that's also where the phrase "off the rails" comes from, right? There's no way I can get off of them. I have to follow this. So I cannot choose to jump off because then the train just leaves. I cannot turn the train anywhere, right? I cannot manipulate any signals. Um, Nothing I do matters. I'm just sitting here and the adventure just happens at me, like in a theme park, right? You're on the, I don't know, on some Disney ride or something, Pirates of the Caribbean, and then you just go there. Oh, here, this is the pirates singing in the cave. Oh, this is a big ship battle. Oh, this is Port Royal. Da 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 da. And you just kind of sit there, and the story just happens at you, and you don't get any say. And then at the end, you come out of the tunnel, and it's like, oh, yeah, it was fun, but I was just an audience member, right? That is railroading. Um, it doesn't necessarily mean a linear story, right? Uh, so it's that is a completely different spectrum. Fair enough. Yeah, it is often like it's and this is the term is often thrown around like this, right? People say, "Oh, you have railroading on one side and then you have the sandbox on the other side where everything is open and the players can do everything they want and nothing is determined blah blah blah." It's that's not actually how it works. Those two are completely different. So, you have railroading over here, right? And then you have sandbox over here. You can definitely railroad a sandbox. It is possible. It is a bit more difficult, but it is definitely possible to railroad a sandbox. Um, so those two are not the opposites. What are the opposites? Well, we don't have good terms for that because everyone puts railroading and sandbox as the opposites of a spectrum. That we've never thought about, well, what are the actual opposites? What are the actual other sides? Um, so there are I don't like the term linear. Linear implies too much. Again, there's only one possible path. Um, I'm gonna call this a single thread story, and this is a term from TV shows and movies and such. So I cannot write, right? Where you have a story thread that's going through, and sometimes you might have two or three or four story threads, right? In a TV show, you usually get this kind of deal. So I'm kind of badly borrowing a term from that medium. No B plot, yeah, that kind of deal, right? So you get like a single thread story. It's not necessarily single thread, but essentially there is this one thing that's happening, and everything else is barren and uninteresting, right? So you can totally have, and I have run games like this as well. Mysteries tend to be like this, right? But also you can have a big world-saving quest that is run like this, right? Investigating a cult and such that can also be like this. So you have a clear thread going. Yeah, no, this is where the adventure lies, and there is not going to be anything else outside. Really, the big difference is um between this and a railroad is you don't outright negate players if they want to do other things, right? And um within this single thread, the players can definitely muck about. They can say, well, we could go investigate the cult today, or we can do some more research and investigate the cult next week, right? And then you say, all right, fair, do what you want. And then the players say, you know what? We don't feel secure enough yet. Let's go investigate the cult first. Let's go hit a library, talk to people, whatever. And then in that time you say, all right, now the cult just completes a ritual. Right? I've talked about examples like this a lot. So their choices still have consequences. If they go now, then they disrupt the ritual. Or they never finish preparations, and then that becomes easier. But storming in without information might be like, oh, they didn't know that the cult deals in demon worshipping, and then they have to prepare for fights with demons, and so on and so forth. But if they do research, well, maybe they complete the portal and summon a minor demon lord, and now if you go now, sure, now you know that they're gonna face demons, but you're gonna face a minor demon lord, right? So that's the consequences that I was talking about. Choices have consequences. Um, and in railroading, choices don't have consequences, right? It's like, do we want to go now, or do we want to research the cult first? And then as soon as the words research the cult first, or like, do we want to? The GM starts panicking and says, there is no library here in this town. No one actually knows about the cult. They're very, very secretive. Yeah, no, there's an eclipse happening because of the cult activity, and people are panicking, and they are pushing you toward the ruin now and say, please go in, right? And that's railroading, right? Where you negate player agency. Very, very different, right? Notice that in this single thread story, we're still dealing with the same basic thing, right? We're still dealing with the adventurers have to fight the cult, right? And that's still the main thread that we are dealing with, but how you approach it, where inside this thread the story goes, that is open. Or if you want to go to them and the DM forces you to research, yeah, exactly. It's like, the town gates are closed for this week because the king is mad. Um, there is like, and then at some point it's like your god comes down and says you must read this book now, and chains you to a library desk with a divine chain of retribution, and forces you to do your research or things like that, right? You can go over the top with railroading. I mean, and at some point it becomes very, very obvious, but yeah. It's like there's this critical piece of information you have to find in this book before you could ever have a chance of facing the cult. And then if you are a GM who really doesn't quite know what they're doing, then you go, okay, you read the book, roll on your religion check, please. And then you fail the roll and you go, roll again, please. And then you fail the roll again, and it's like, roll again with advantage and a +10 modifier. And then it's like, oh, you find this piece of information. Here, have this 2-page text about the background of the cult or something, right? I've been there. I have been in games like that, and it's not that extreme, but with that kind of things happening, and it becomes blindingly obvious what's happening, and that really pulls you out. So what's the opposite of railroading? Well, the opposite of railroading is, of course, player agency. Again, there's no good term for it, but it's like agency matters, right? Where the players have choices, and these choices have consequences, right? That is the part a lot of people tend to forget. Giving players choices is good, but these choices then need to have consequences. That's the part that's usually not followed up on. Yeah, it's good intention, but can be frustrating. Yes, definitely. Where you're like, you have to do this now. Um, And a lot of the fault is with published adventures like that, because or people writing their own adventures with only published adventures as their guide, because a published adventure typically goes very long. And sure, the opening and the first act, let's call it that, right? You can kind of sort of predict, all right, this is probably going to happen. There are only a handful of possible choices to make, right? So I can kind of write this out and give it to people. But then after that, every act that follows, the amount of choices that could have been made start compounding. And really, you cannot write anything feasible for like the fifth or sixth or seventh act, because you just don't know where you are. And the only way to get to that will then typically include some sort of railroading. And it can be done well, or it can be done blindingly, obviously. And depending on how much you base your choices on, or not your choices, but like what is not railroading, very, very quick aside, what is not railroading is planning toward your expectations of what the players will do, right? If the players say, we are a party of heroic adventurers, we help those in need, and so far they've always played this way, right? Then you go, okay, if I throw, I don't know, a little old lady in front of them who's saying like, oh my god, my town has been overrun by zombies, blah, 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 then you can expect the players to want to help out, right? That's not railroading. That's knowing your players, right? So you can definitely do that in a longer prep, and you can say, yeah, well, my players, I know them so far, I know the characters they're playing. They are likely going to choose this general direction of choices, so I can prep toward there, right? Um, and so on. So that's definitely possible. That's something you can do. Um, but yeah, at some point the possible choices just start compounding, and then it might completely change the landscape of the adventure, and then later acts are just not there anymore, right? um and it also matters how big and small these choices are, or their consequences are. If the consequences are things like um what is it, a ritual gets completed, let's just return to the standard example because it's easy. A ritual gets completed, right? Um, it depends on the setup. It depends on things like, uh, did the players ever have a chance of disrupting this ritual? Well, you can write the story, or you can set up the situation, is probably a better term. Set up the situation in such a way that they don't ever have a chance of disrupting the ritual. But maybe they have a chance of mitigating its effects. Maybe they have a chance of learning about it way before and start moving there. When the ritual is complete, they're like 2 days away instead of 2 weeks away, or whatever, right? Um, you can do that. Does it feel good? Not necessarily, right? It's like, we have no chance of getting there, but we have to rush anyway. Let's see. Um, if on the other hand you set it up like, oh, the players are sitting in a bush watching this ritual happen, and then in the story, in the adventure, you write, the players have to wait for the ritual to complete, uh while sitting in the bush just staring at it. Then it becomes very, very obvious, right? If anything else then starts to like fail, if the players are like, can I shoot the main dude who is chanting all of the strange language stuff, trying to summon whatever it is they're doing here? Right? No, he has a force field around him. Oh, can I shoot one of the helpers then? No, they have force fields around them as well that block off all projectiles. Well, what if I cast a fireball into their midst? Um, actually, it's also an anti magic field. Well, what if I just draw my sword and rush into there and start hacking away. Actually, there's also a force field around the whole ritual site. Well, what if well, no, actually, the bush has turned into vines and you're all grappled now. You cannot do anything but watch. And yeah. So, I guess real learning is a lack of player agency. Yes, exactly. The opposite is giving them agency with the consequences. Yes. Yes. That's really the railroad, right? Because when you're on a railroad, the only choices you have are keep going or stop. You don't have any other choices, right? Um, and that's not player agency. That's do I play or do I not play? Do I just pack up and leave because I'm just an audience member, right? Do you think of it as a theme park ride? I think that's not a bad analogy, right? The story happens at you, and then the player agency side is you have choices, and these choices matter and have consequences. The most meta thing my DM did was cast a spell. I love this, but was basically a spell that stopped actions against them while they are monologuing. Then we stole the spell. Oh, okay, that is cool. That, yeah. I mean, giving you this ability then? Yeah, sure. That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, that is definitely making things real, right? This is kind of deconstructing. Okay, if this spell now exists in this world, then the players, if the players find a way to get it, then they need to be able to play with it, right? Um, and it's not like, oh, it only exists because I need to block off these actions here for now, like this impenetrable, completely anti-magic force field around the ritual site that only appears and exists now in this very moment because the players wanted to do the sensible thing and disrupt whatever ritual was happening there. And either way, this is an actual adventure. Howdy, hope everyone having a good evening. Hello, June, July? Is that how you say it? Please correct me if I'm wrong. June. Yeah, welcome, welcome. How's it going? Hope you had a good weekend. Um, yeah, we're talking about some TTRPG prep and such. Um, where was it? Oh yeah, that's an actual adventure, by the way. One of the most horribly railroaded adventures. Now it's more like Julie. Okay, June, Julie. All right, got it. Thanks for letting me know. I was just thinking, it's like it's the 2 months, but okay, I thought wrong. That's that's on me. All right. Oh, stretch and hydrate. Thank you very much. Should probably, yeah. Ugh. Sounds like one of the Tiamat ones from 5e, but I never got to the end of it. Um, Surprisingly, no. It's it's a campaign even. It's a campaign made of 3 books called, is it like the Snake Amphora trilogy, something like that. I forgot the name, but it is, I've read snippets of it here and there. Um it is, that is actually the thing that where player agency has no meaning. Right? That's the thing where the ritual scene actually appears in. Like quite literally, the players stumble upon the ritual being performed right now, and the adventure expects them to wait until it's finished. Um, right? Or there's a scene in there where they travel to a different city by a ship, and then they can do like, oh, we get this whole big challenge of convincing the captain to go faster and so on, and sail unsafely so that we can rush to this other city in on time. If they fail this check, this whole big deal, the scene, then the captain does not sail faster, and then they arrive to the city, but the city has already been overrun by demons. Sucks. If they make it this challenge, then the captain sails as fast as he can, and then they arrive at the city after it's been overrun by demons. Same outcome. So why did we have this big scene of like convincing the captain? Yeah, because we needed something to do on the trip. I don't know. So that's railroading, where you give the players a choice and the choice doesn't even matter. Yeah. So more XP. I don't know. But it's like, yeah. So that's what railroading is. It's not necessarily it is taking away player choices and player agency. Or you have the GMPC who does everything for you. Oh yeah. That is also a big sign. Um it's not always a bad thing. I've played once in a mystery game, like an investigative mystery game where there was a DMPC, but that GMPC was basically there to point us in the right direction and to give us to have someone convenient to give us clues or so if we got stuck, which was a bit ham-fisted, but you know, it was okay. And that was also the person who hired us to find a missing person or something, right? So it was a while ago. But yeah, the GMPC who is the bestest at everything and just does all of the solving all the problems and such. Yeah, that's a big no. DMPC can go bat real quick. It can. It really can. Especially since a lot of GMs then focus on running the GMPC instead of running the adventure. So yeah. Or like having an extended dialogue between two NPCs is like, yeah, a handful of lines here and there to get the context, to get the gist is okay, but like playing out 2-3 minutes of a dialogue, like players will just boom, will just shut off. Um so yeah, but this is all like small, I don't want to call them tricks, but like small things to be aware of. That is good to know, but not quite yet in the big grand scheme of things. Seems like a cutscene. Yeah, exactly. It feels like a cutscene. A cutscene that might not even be relevant to the story or might not even reveal big things, right? It's just a random, oh my god, George, hey Lisa, oh, how have you been doing? Same old, same old. It's like, oh, how's your wife? Blah, blah, blah. And then you just talk like this. It's like, I don't care. Once had a DMPC was an aspiring god, we could pray to them to get advantage on rolls. Okay. That could either be really horrific or a really awesome plot device. Um, like guard that person to actually to their apotheosis. Um, that could be an interesting story, or it could go bad really, really quickly, being like, I am the most important out of all of you. Things like that. Hmm. But that's is definitely an interesting premise, gotta say. Okay. So safe to say I didn't really have fun playing. Me and other new players kind of treated as lackeys to them. Yeah, okay, so that's the bad variant where the GMPC just goes, I am more important. You are here to serve me. Yeah, no. That sucks. Definitely. Um I mean that's a lot, that's a whole bunch of other things. This falls into a whole category of things that are like, again, all of these tips I'm giving are kind of made under the premise that the GM is well intentioned and collaborates with the players, but just doesn't have the necessary knowledge and tools to understand what they're doing, right? Because no one teaches prepping and running sessions. So I didn't mean to get off topic. No, that's okay. This is why I live stream this thing. This is why this is not a video. It's a live stream. We're here to just discuss things that come up. It's perfectly okay. Um right? I could have made this into just a static video and then, you know, achieve a different goal. We kind of get off the rails, no railroading. Yeah, exactly. No railroading here. Um, it's yeah. So don't. It's perfectly okay. Right? If you have anything to discuss or any questions, right? That's also why I do this, right? There's a lot of questions that might pop up, and then we can just take care of them. So, um, what was I talking about? Right. So, again, this is the premise of me discussing all this is GM is well intentioned, but just clueless, I guess. It sounds pretty bad, but like they have never been properly taught or never really found any good guides and such on prepping and running sessions, and they're stuck in this paradigm of only looking at published adventures, which are often not great, or looking at other forms of media like static media or video games or such, and then that leads them down this path of I have to run the story, but I also have to plan for every possible choice that the players could be making. And then you get like somewhere between these two that I have here, right? Either a completely linear story that gets railroaded, or the GM starts planning all of these branches and then you throw away 80-90% of your prep because only one path through will be followed. And that's not great, right? For most GMs. So the thing is that they want to prep something and want to collaborate with the players, right? This is not for GMs that have more fundamental problems, thinking like power fantasies over the players, or um like wanting to actually just have the players be the test audience for their novel. Like that has happened a lot as well. um right, or like the adversarial GM who's just there to murder the player characters at every turn, right? This is not for them. Those problems are more fundamental, and you cannot solve these by telling the GM how to prep, um because the GM fundamentally has no interest in this kind of prep, right? They are a griefer playing a completely different game, essentially, right? Um, so that's like, yeah. As a player, if you run into those kind of GMs, best thing to do is just to stop playing. Just leave. There's so many people playing RPGs now. It's no longer the 2000s. It's no longer a niche hobby that gets you weird looks, and even some people that still say, "Oh, but you're actually summoning Satan." Um, yeah, no, the 2000s there were still people talking about that. So, this is we're a quarter century later now. RPGs are a big hobby that everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people have at the very least heard of. And so it's a lot easier to find players now. So you're not stuck with bad GMs like this. Or if you're a GM at a table and your players are being disruptive murder hobos like that, again, just leave. Just can find other players. You're not. We're spoiled for choice nowadays. So that's a luxury. Make use of it, definitely. So yeah, that's the premise. Right. So I was saying, how do I avoid this kind of paradigm? You don't prep the story, you prep a situation, right? And this is also something, the story is the thing that happens in the game. Online community really does expand the selection pool. Yeah, exactly. Like I basically play everything online now. um I had a couple of people back in Germany that I would play with, but again, I would do both. I would play online. I live streamed a couple of sessions here and there. I would play with people in real life. I would play by text, play by chat. I would do that as well. Right? All sorts just to get my fill. So yeah, there's good virtual tabletops now. There's a lot of Like even like dice rolling apps and such. Just, ugh. There's a lot of good things to use nowadays. So, um, yeah, don't feel trapped. Definitely. Um, right, prepping. Back to prepping. So, what does it mean prepping the situation? Right? What what do I consider? So, oh, it's a different color. That's okay. Yeah, okay. Let me. Actually, that's gonna be. Yeah, no. Let me do this in a different color. Why not? So the how we got here. Right. So you prep the adventure background. Things like, yeah, how did we get here? What is the situation right now? Moments or a day or so before the player characters intersect with it and start mucking about, right? Uh, who is involved? So the major players, right? And this includes things like the important NPCs, but also things like factions, right? Or maybe even monsters, right? If you want to expand the whole idea of major players, you could include things like events, right? A cosmic event is going to happen, the planets are going to align, and the sun is going to darken, and all the dead are going to rise from their graves again. That could be something, right? And oh, the planetary alignment is going to happen in 2 weeks, right? And now the players hear about it, and now they're like, oh, do we want to do something about it? Is there something we can do about it? And that's how the adventure starts. Um, Maybe you have one faction that really wants to bring about this planetary alignment and make sure everything is in place. Maybe you have another faction that really does not want to do that to happen, right? Um, and I don't know, you might have some preliminary events happening, right? Some doom signs of the doom that is approaching. Um, Maybe just in general restless, like I don't know, maybe there's a nexus of activity somewhere and then the dead have risen from that place already, right, as a portent. um or I don't know, because of all the necromantic energies that are flowing around, healing magic starts going wild, right? Or other magical rituals that have been in place start fizzing out, and suddenly, I don't know, other problems start appearing, other fires start appearing. Heck, this is a big campaign. Now, now that I think about it, right? It's just like, and you can have these things happen um in stages as well, right? So you get, and this is the next point, a general, very, very, that's the wrong color, a general timeline. General timeline of events as they would happen if the players didn't do anything. Right? Now, obviously, you are prepping this to fail, meaning you expect the players to intervene, and that means the timeline will invariably be changed. Yes, exactly. The idea of what will happen if nothing happened. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, the timeline of events and actions that factions will take, etc., if the players didn't do anything, right? So, if the players were just the Fantastic Four movie guys. Um, But obviously, you know for a fact that this is going to be thrown out at some point, because hopefully, if the players do their job and are good players and play their heroic characters and intervene, then things will change. But this timeline gives you an idea of which parts will change, how they might change, and what they will change into, right? So maybe the players managed to stop this one person. Okay, so maybe then the cult he was working for doesn't get this magical item that he was retrieving. Fine. But other things that the cult is doing remain unchanged. So there you can just follow the timeline, right? But what does this missing magical item that the players now recovered, what does that mean for the cult? What does that mean for the events? Well, if you prepped all of this saying, well, okay, the cult is looking for the magic item. Why are they looking for it? What do they hope to achieve with it? Right? That is part of your prep. And now that the players have the item and not the cult, you know how things will change, right? Um, so this is general timeline if players didn't intervene. And you can even prep like some key locations, other key aspects, right? Oh god, my handwriting. Key aspects. Yeah, okay. Such as locations, items, right? Um, lore, right? Special knowledge that the players can learn. Um, whatever. There's so much, right? We're generally talking about fantasy here. There's so many things. Glortnum corn. Hi Kitty, how are you doing? Welcome, welcome. How goes? I hope your weekend was good. Um, we're talking tabletop role playing games today. Also, I have no idea what you just said. Glorpnum corn, but okay. Hi everyone. Yes, hello, welcome. Of course, of course. Um, right. So why do you prep these things, or what? Not just why do you prep these things? You prep these things because you want them. Late for lecture? That's okay. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Right. So why you prep these? Obviously to have them, to be prepared for the adventure. But what do you focus on? You focus on um how the world, I'm just going to call it the world, right? That includes everything, including natural events, including factions in it, including the people or magic or whatever that is in there, how the world reacts to player actions, right? So like I said, the cult wants this magical item for their ritual. Why do they want it? What do they hope to achieve for it? How are they trying to get it? And then after some adventuring, the players manage to retrieve this item and keep it away from the cult. Okay, what happens now to the cult? Right? Now you know what happens because you said why they want the item, what they're going to use it for. If it's like, oh, they just wanted the item because it makes the ritual a bit faster, right? Instead of taking a week longer, then you can say, all right, then the cult just decides it's not worth our resources tracking down that item again. Let's just go ahead with our plan, adjust our timeline a bit, whatever. But if that item was a key component to their ritual and now they're stuck, well, now you know that the cult is going to invest every resource they have in tracking down the players and getting that thing back, right? And that's two completely different trajectories for the adventure. In the first part, in the first style, or in the first prep, in the first whatever you want to call it, first reality, the players bought themselves a bit more time to track down the cult. Okay, nice, cool. Maybe they can even use the item. Maybe it's attuned to the ritual in some way, and they can use it to scry on the cult. Awesome, right? It gives them more choices. And the other one, well, the entire campaign just shifted into a stay alive from this mad cult trying to get you now, right? Um, Completely different stories, but it shows that there's a consequence now for the players deciding to grab the item. Um, and you can know this by just having the appropriate prep for it, right? Um, so you know how the world reacts by prepping reasons. Let me write that a bit cleaner. Reasons for their actions, right? And things like uh methods, resources, etc. Right? Um so a lot of this is knowing what you have to work with. And I'm not talking about meta tools of like, oh, how do I prepare things and such. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about um in story tools, in narrative tools, right? Of things like do that. Okay. Um of like, oh, what if I have this cult in the game? What knowledge do they possess? What resources do they possess? What methods do they usually go for? Are they perfectly okay with just murdering a bunch of innocents just to get to their goal, or do they want to be covert? Do they use political power? Do they have powerful magic? Can they just grab an army of mercenaries to do their bidding? Right, things like that. Um, what do they have available to them? And then you use these tools to um to perform the goals of this faction. One of the best ways that I saw this play out as a player was when we were able to take an artifact from the guild that we're using to open a portal, but we found out that the energy inside was equivalent to 1,000 lives, and we knew the next plan. Ooh, okay, cool. So, like, they sacrificed 1,000 people to charge up the artifact? Is that what you mean? Um, right, okay. They were now going to need to kill 1,000 people. Right. Oh, okay, to enact their plan. Right. So, okay, so the artifact had that energy, and the alternative was to kill 1,000 people. Right. Okay. So there was probably going to be a stream of kidnappings happening. Right. Okay. Yeah, that is really cool. That is really really good. Right. So you get something, you achieve a goal, and that goal immediately points you to uh the next thing that's gonna happen. It's gonna be a lead or like a clue to the next stage of the adventure. That is really good. Um, that is well done, definitely. Right, and then you know roughly what's gonna happen. Probably 1,000 people are gonna be kidnapped or so, or murdered to charge up other artifacts and such. And now you know. Now you have a lot of choice how to go about it. Right? Yeah, that is really really good. Okay. Um, yeah, so a very nice example of that working. Um, okay, so prepping and running, I kind of sort of in how I was talking about this down here, right? Prepping and running is an interplay, right? So basically, oh, the ad is gonna happen soon. Okay, let me just put down the title. Interplay of prepping. My handwriting is atrocious. And running. Okay, let me put the title on here, and hopefully I can draw a clean line this time around. Not really. I practice this. And okay, but yeah, I need to step away real quick for the ad. Um, and be right back. So I will see you all. Oops, in a couple minutes, and then yeah, I'll be back after the ad break. So yeah, I will see you all soon. Do hydrate and stretch and such if you need. Okay.
Endure. In enduring, grow strong. Okay, I'm back. Also, I stepped out of the study to discover that my entire family is here. They just randomly came to visit. Um, so I cannot go on for too much longer. I told them maybe another hour-ish, but then I will have to end. So yeah, I do apologize for that. Mm. Yeah, very unexpected visit. Okay. Where was I? The interplay of prepping and running. So this is why I'm discussing both of these together, because how you want to run your game determines what you need to prep, and what you have prepped determines how you can run it, right? So both of these are connected. Also, I'm just eating a little bit of food. So I kind of touched upon this a little bit um before when I was talking about this example, right, um of the cult, and you grabbing their ritual item, and then what will happen, and so on. So you prep. So things like the background, major players, um, and the timeline, right? You have that here so that um you can provide context and uh react to player actions, right? So providing context is things like if the players ask you questions, right? um of like, oh, what happened here, why is, I don't know, why is this entire town so militarized, or whatever, um or ask questions to people like, what does this person know, right? Then you can already, then you understand what does this person know, what are they willing to tell, but also a bit more meta things like what information do the players need to be able to continue, right? So you can also tell that, being like, well, if the players don't know the cult exists, they can't try to go after the cult, so they need to learn of it somehow, right? And maybe the players spend a whole day in the tavern just, carousing, taking time with the local townsfolk, getting to know the area, and then you can have rumors seep in. It's like, yeah, at the end of the day, it seems like every second person you've talked to in that tavern mentioned something about this cult, right? And some of the stories were very outrageous, some of them were hushed whispers, etc. But everyone seemed to generally agree on da 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 da, and this is now the info that the players need to be able to step into the adventure, right? Um, so you just give it to them like that, or maybe the players don't spend the day in the tavern. Maybe they seek an audience. Maybe they play lots of like clerics and paladins or whatnot, and then they go to the local church, and then the leader of the church is like, yeah, so we've received some divine guidance that there is a disturbance in the force, right? So something is happening out there. It seems to be some strange activity that is really messing with, you know, the magical fields around here, and we don't know what it is, but it's somewhere out there. So the players don't necessarily know it's a cult, but they can now go out and investigate whatever that place is, and then get more information from there, right? Or whatever, right? Maybe they stumble across a former cult member who, maybe like a murder case, right? It's like, oh, someone's been killed. Who is this dude? Well, a former cult member, and then they find a diary of this person writing down, oh, I'm so sorry I participated in this. Da 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 da. This is what I knew. It's not much because I was just a small member, but hopefully someone can can stop them before it's too late, and so right. There's a lot of possibilities of how you can get this information to the players, and I just came up with this while sitting here, right? um, but again, if I know that the players need to know that a cult exists and that they can go out and investigate it, then how they get to this information, it doesn't really matter, right? At the end of the day, um, obviously, if I then choose one of these paths, then yeah, I will write it down and say they learned about the cult from this and this. And then if I need to, I can reference it later again, right? Um, maybe it is the divine providence, and then they can keep returning to the church and make that their base of operations, right? Why not? It's fun to come up with all these adventure ideas. It really is. See, and this is like when I say that if you enjoy doing this and you're okay with spending 8 hours just doing things like this and you're having fun, go ahead. It can indeed be a lot of fun. Um, but you shouldn't have to do that, right? That shouldn't have to be the expectation. Um, right. And then as the players do things and as you improvise things to put into the game, right? For instance, you have this church leader, um, who is now possibly a major player in this, right? You go back here and you adapt your nodes, right? You add information, you add anything new that came up in the session. Um, you change things, change essentially, or not essentially, but what's the word I'm looking for? Especially the timeline, right? You look at what did the players change, how are things gonna adapt from there, um, and so on and so forth, and then this becomes an interplay like this, right? Where and the more you do this, the more you understand what you need to prep in order to be able to do this, to react to player actions. And it is a big step. It is definitely a very, very big step to shift from this kind of choose your own adventure where I prep every single scene to only prepping the background information and then adapting to what the players are doing. It is a big shift. It's kind of like letting go of safety rails. Um, but once you have done that, it becomes so freeing because by its very nature, this information that you prep for the more open-ended play is going to be much less than the information you need to prep for a choose your own adventure thing. And very often, when you have a choose your own adventure style write up, you have to prepare this stuff anyway. You have to prepare the background of the adventure. You have to prepare the major players, right? You have to understand the basic timeline. You have to understand where is it's happening, what is included in it, etc. So you're doing all of this prep already anyway, right? It's just what kinds of details do you need to include for you to be effectively able to run at the table. So this is the point. So what do you prep for things like factions, right? Or let's go in a little bit more detail for the background, right? Basically, it in general it is a timeline of events up to current moment. Right? And again, how many events you want to put in there, how detailed you want to be, depends on you, right? How much can you feel like you can improvise versus how much do you feel like you need to write down first? That's an individual assessment, right? Some people only need like 5 words. Some people need a whole page or two. That's that's on you to figure out how your brain works, right? But having some sort of background of what has happened so far. Then the major players, you want like their goals. Let me not write there all the time. I will have to write that every single time. So goals, right? What do they want to achieve in this? And this is usually going to be in the context of the adventure, right? It's going to be relevant to it somehow. Like the whole planets are going to align, cult is going to raise dead, etc. So you might have one faction that's the cult. They want this to happen. Why? Well, it always helps to look for the reasons, right? Few people do things just for the heck of it, especially something as big as raising the dead on across the entire world, right? Why are they serving some deity of the undead? Do they plan some sort of huge upheaval, and then grab power? Is it a power snatch? Is it, I don't know, were they wronged and it's a very personal, like, rage against the world kind of deal? Um, are they being magically controlled by a demon? Who knows, right? It's your game. You come up with something that sounds fun to your players and yourself. Um, then resources, right? What do they have available? Do they have a lot of money? Do they have a lot of connections? Do they have a lot of political influence? Maybe this cult is run by someone who's actually, I don't know, a minister or something, right? So this person has two faces. Outwardly, during the day, they can play their political connections to get resources and approval or make certain incidents that of cult activity just disappear, right? And at night, they're a cult trying to summon. They're in a cult trying to summon all the undead, right? Maybe, right? Maybe that's what's happening. Um, or they might have, I don't know, a long history, a lot of knowledge. I don't know, maybe there are actual demons on their side. Heck, that's a pretty cool resource to have, right? If they're controlled by a demon lord, maybe that demon lord then says, "Here, have a small troop of lesser demons to do your bidding to help make this plan come to fruition." Etc., etc. What methods are they willing to employ? Right? That is also something good to just, again, you don't need to write out a complete a game plan and things like that, but just like maybe a few hard lines they're not willing to cross. They're not willing to harm innocents or whatever. Or maybe they are super willing to harm innocents and burn down everything, right? Why the heck not? More dead people to raise. Um, you know, all those sorts of things. Maybe some secrets that they will go to lengths to protect, like this dual identity. Maybe the minister really does not want this dual identity to come up and will do anything to keep that an actual secret. Um, and make, if the player characters start coming close to the investigation and being like starting to um suspect something is wrong with the minister, well, maybe the minister will pour vast resources into making these characters disappear, right? So things like that. Um, resources can also include things like a base of operations, right? I like the dual identity idea. It's not new, but it's always really fun. Yeah, it is, especially since it gives more angles of attack for the players as well. Right? They can either attack the cult as the cult, or they can attack the minister as the minister if they have evidence. Or maybe they don't and they just murder him because he's less protected when he's out in his political persona. Or more easily reachable, and then it's like, we'll deal with the fallout later. We just want this guy dead for now, right? And deal with those ramifications. Exactly, exactly. Right. So there's a lot to do here. Um, and by the way, all of you have full permission to take these ideas and write whatever adventure you want. It's gonna I mean, if I write something based on these ideas and you write something based on these ideas, it's gonna be two completely different adventures. So more adventures for everyone. That's a good thing. Um, just don't plug them into any AI. Yeah. Um, major players. What? Okay, and then the timeline, right? That was the next point. The timeline. Again, this is the assumed assumed events without. I swear I can spell without PC intervention. That's a horrible. There we go. Right? So this is basically, and one of each of these leads to the next. So we have the basic background that leads into the major players because they want to do something with this. The planetary alignment is happening. All the dead are going to rise. Okay, so different major players are now reacting to this collection of events that has led us here, right? And then these major players have their goals and reasons and resources, etc. And that leads to a timeline of events of what they're going to do. Obviously, if the PCs don't interfere, they'll be able to meet those goals. Yeah, exactly, exactly. The worst case. Yeah, exactly that. It's if the PCs don't interfere or they do something else, right? Maybe there are multiple things happening in parallel, multiple faction goals or multiple preparations and such happening in parallel, and the PCs can only take care of one of them, even if they know of more of them. Then which one they choose to interrupt or help out or whatever is the one that will be changed, but everything else is gonna proceed, right? So maybe there's like, oh, there's this person that is going to be kidnapped by the cult because I don't know, their blood is supercharged, or they descend from a line of tieflings, and the cult needs this divine blood, right? This demon infused blood to power their rituals. Let's protect this tiefling. Okay, so they protect the tiefling, successfully ward off some attacks, and then get them to a safe place somewhere in the church, maybe, right? Escort quest. Why not? Um, but at the same time, the cult was researching some more lore and found a powerful book that they need. And now they have the book in their possession. Welp, right? Uh so you win some, you lose some, right? That's kind of the idea. And if both of these things are in the timeline, Colt is going to kidnap the tiefling, and Colt is going to search for the book. And the PCs only intervene in the tiefling part. Well, then now you know the rest still proceeds as planned. And that's where the timeline. It's not like as soon as the first session is over, the entire timeline becomes invalidated. That's not usually the case, right? Because you have multiple players following multiple things, and there's a lot of interplay happening. So, yeah, and that's what happens here. And you can keep adjusting the timeline. You're saying, okay, now that the tiefling is safe and they cannot use this anymore, what are the next steps that will follow? Right? And you can put that into the timeline again. as like timeline version 2, right? Kind of a deal. Um, and then so these are the kind of um things, and then with this you can then say, all right, so this means I need some key aspects such as important locations, the underground cult base, right? Eventually the PCs are gonna go there because that's where the ritual is. Uh so I know I will have to prepare that at some point, right? Um Items, like I said. The book, the magical book. What is it? Why does the cult want it? If the PCs get it, what can they do with it? Right? What kind of stuff is inside of it? What can they learn? Lore, right? And also, I'm gonna put this as a separate thing, clues. So this is what we're talking about in the beginning. If there's this cult and the PCs need to somehow know that this cult exists and roughly understand what they're doing, and maybe it could also be helpful that they learn eventually about the planetary alignment and maybe a prophecy that says, oh, if this happens, the sky will go dark and the dead will rise again, blah, 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 all of that stuff. Would be cool if the PCs knew about these things so that any decisions they make are made inside the context of this is the greater deal, right? So that they're not just arbitrarily flipping coins of like, oh, let's go here or let's go there, but that they actually understand, all right, this is happening in the background right now. And these are the precise points and how we can disrupt this, right? So giving them context. I'll write that down in a separate thing. But that's also the clues. Like, what clues do you want them to have? You can distribute these clues to people or objects or so if you want. Sometimes that's not necessary, right? Because the PCs might just suddenly question someone, and then you say, "All right, now is a good point. This is the golden opportunity. They're questioning a captured cultist, and they managed to intimidate this person into revealing some secrets. This is a golden opportunity for me as a GM to very uh naturalistically insert this information and give it to the PCs, right? Um, and then you just decide, all right, there's this clue. They need this one right now. They don't have it yet. Boom, done. Put it in there. And clues should point toward um, truths or secrets, right? And the idea is you kind of want to go from the opposite way, right? You kind of want to establish what truths or facts and such do the PCs need, and then come up with a whole bunch of clues in how they can learn this truth, right? Um, Murder case, for example, and you as the GM who writes the murder case know that the murderer is a werewolf. Okay, that's the truth. But you don't really just want to outright tell the PCs at the first possible opportunity, the murderer is a werewolf, ah, because the whole game is kind of them figuring this out, right? Okay, so what can you have? Maybe near one of the murder sites there are wolf paw prints. Okay. Maybe the victims were murdered not by a weapon, a conventional weapon, but by something that looks like an animal bit them to death or so. Tufts of fur. Maybe someone involved in the case is known to have a weird sickness and they kind of stay indoors regularly, right? Um, etc., 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 etc. Right? Maybe there was a former lover or something, and then they figured out something may have been wrong, but they died like several years ago. But maybe they left behind something, a diary or something, right? Or maybe this person works at a certain place, and then their coworkers, a boss or whatever, can tell you about some strange mannerisms that this person might have, and so on. And so, like, it's very, very easy. Again, I just came up with this while sitting here. It's very easy to just come up with a whole bunch of these clues. Why is there so much fur when they don't have any pets? Yeah, exactly. Right. Uh, that kind of a deal. And and it's better. to play fast and loose with these clues. It's better to give the players more clues than necessary than to withhold them and being playing the cards too close to your chest. Because you have to remember, and this applies to all of these things, by the way. All of these things the players can and should eventually be clued in. They should eventually know who some of the major players are so that they can make informed decisions. They should know what the kind of plans are that are in motion right now so that, again, they can make informed decisions. Like the example you just said with 1,000 lives, right? It's like, oh, now 1,000 people need to be kidnapped. Okay, now we know what to do. We know our next step. um they should know about what has led us here, again, so they can make informed decisions. Making informed decisions is important. Giving players choices is nice. Giving players choices with context so that they can actually make a decision and not just an arbitrary coin flip, that is what you're striving for. So let me write that down right now, because this is all tied together. Players need information to have the proper context for their choices. Right? So it's this idea, this example that I keep bringing up. You come to a dungeon intersection, a T intersection, right? There's a path that leads left, there's a path that leads right. Which way do you go? And if that's the only information they have, right? Oh, there's a path that leads left, there's a path that leads right, then it comes down to a coin flip, right? The players don't have a meaningful decision. It's just like, left because why the heck not? But if you give them some more context, something like, oh, there is the stink of death that comes down the right pathway, and down the left pathway, you hear the dripping or flowing, the sounds of water, right? And it's like, right, okay, so we have been fighting ghouls here and there in this dungeon. So stink of death, I feel like that's where the ghoul's lair is. Um, to the other side, an underground river, maybe that might be a new path, right? And then it's not a lot of info, but it's enough info to make the players think, all right, I have some sort of context here to make a decision of, do we want to face ghouls? Possibly ghouls. I never said it was ghouls, but I'm hinting at that it could be that, right? Maybe it's not ghouls, maybe it's something else, but still, the whole stink of death thing is a context that they can then base their decisions off, right? Um, and so on and so forth. And you want this to happen in your games. You want the players to have enough context to make informed decisions. So it's better to give them more info than to give them too little. Also, because if you've ever played a mystery game, like a mystery RPG game with either as a GM who doesn't quite know what they're doing, or as a player with a GM who doesn't quite know what they're doing, um, like very often you're just completely lost. Right? At least that's happened to me multiple times as a player, where it's like you're just completely lost. It doesn't even have to be a mystery game; it can be any game. And it even happens in some video games sometimes if it's not created well. You're just lost, and you sit there and going, "Where do I need to go? What do I have to do? What is happening now?" Right? Um, and that's usually because you don't have enough clues telling you what is happening here or where to go to find more clues, right? If it's like, oh yeah, we have this prime suspect, the suspect has disappeared, but he used to work at this and this spot, right? And this company, then you go, right, let's go to that company and ask around. And that is a lead that tells you where you can go next, right? Um, and so you're not lost. Or maybe you have gotten the clue before, but you forgot about it. That happens as well, right? We're human. There's a lot of information to take in. We may have just forgot about it. Maybe we misinterpret a clue or three or 15, right? We misinterpret them and just start building red herrings for ourselves. And it's like, nothing makes sense. I don't understand any of this. I don't know where to go. That can also happen, which is why I suggest not introducing red herrings as the GM because the players are going to fool themselves. Right? They're going to create their own red herrings. You don't need to fool them. It's already hard enough. Um right? And it's just then you don't know what's going on. The benefit of too many clues, there's not such thing as too many clues really. The benefit of lots of clues is the players very clearly know what's going on, maybe, or maybe they think they know what's going on, but they can act on that knowledge, right? And then you could throw in a twist, and it's like, aha, it wasn't a werewolf at all. It was a pet groomer, ah, right? So why not? But at least they weren't lost. They always kind of followed a path, right? And felt like they had control over this. And yeah, they will not lightly not find all the clues, right? Or understand that what you just gave them is a clue, right? So yeah, you need a ton of them. And the good thing is also if you give them more clues, it is just going to confirm what they already know, and then they will feel more secure in their guesses and suspicions and be more ready and willing to act on them, right? Because if you say, yeah, maybe this is the case right now, but we only have this one circumstantial bit of like a tiny sentence in a random comment from this NPC, I don't think this is a lot to build on, and then that thread dies, right? Or there's like, yeah, we maybe have this thing, but this leads us to 15 possible actions. That's too many. I cannot make a choice, right? But if you keep giving them clues for the same thing, then they say, ah, yeah, all right. Now we figured this out. And then if you give them another clue confirming this, then the players get to feel smart. And they're like, I knew it, right? I'm totally not surprised by this clue. We were so correct on our suspicions. We're so smart. And that makes them feel good, right? So yeah, give them lots of clues for the truths that you want them to receive. Um, it's like I once ran a mystery game on stream, live on stream, for a couple of people, and at the end of the adventure, they had 100% completely figured out what was happening. Right? They knew exactly this is going on. There's these people were trying to perform a ritual. We were probably going to be sacrifices for the ritual, and the ritual had something to do with time travel and their ancestor, and they were probably trying to get him back or whatever, blah blah blah. It's like, yep, that's exactly what was happening. That's exactly what was going on. And they figured it out at the end, and then they get to feel good about themselves for having figured it out, right? So yeah, and that's kind of like a feel good moment, an achievement for the players. Um, yeah, so definitely give them all of that. Uh Let me give a quick eye on the time. Okay, and then is there any other key aspects and such? Yeah, anything you need, right? All of this informs what you need to prepare, right? You look at your background, you look at who's the major players, you look at the timeline of events, and then you look at, well, what do I need for this then? Do I need some minor events before that, some portents, right? Do I need some magic effects? Do I need, I don't know, special systems? You may even have to prepare special systems. Like if I have a pirate campaign and it looks like the campaign might go into a ship combat, do I need to prepare things like stats for ships and a ship naval combat system, right? Anything like that. Um, if I'm prepping a party, that was happened in one of my games, right? The players rescued the daughter of a noble and they were invited to a party. It's like, how do I prep this party? What do I want them to get out of it? And so on. Maybe I need to prep this thing. So I had to find a map of a noble residence. I had to make a guest list. I have to make, like, I don't know, topics of conversation, etc., etc. All of these things I had to prep, but like I only knew that I had to prep them because I knew that the players were gonna attend this party, right? Um, Things like that. So let your adventure and how where it's going inform what you need to prep, right? And then meta there's some meta materials. So all of this is tied to the adventure itself, right? You have your adventure, you have, it forms each step, and then there are some meta materials that are just good to have in case you need to throw something in case the players absolutely stump you, and then you go, huh, I don't have anything prepped for this. I've never thought of this. I don't know what to react with right now. Sure, at that point you can just say, take a 5 minute break. I need to think over this. That's perfectly okay as well. You can do that. Yes, you're allowed to take breaks during play and just say, yo, I'm stumped. Give me 5 minutes. I need to look through my notes, see what happens here, right? You can totally do that. Or ask for clarification, right? Use that time to ask for clarification, whatever. But there are some things that you can prep that might be universally useful. And essentially, prep things that you cannot improvise at the table, right? So all of these things that we have so far is basically, if you wanted to improvise all of this background, that would take a long time. You'd have to juggle a lot of information around. It's better to have all of that thought out for now and then just run off it. But there might be other things that you can prep that will help you because it's difficult for you to improvise. Things like name lists, right? If the player characters stumble upon a random NPC or they want to talk to the barkeep or whatever, right? And you suddenly need a name and you're bad at improvising names, make a list of names, right? Why not? Uh Things like generic stat blocks, right? If suddenly the players decide to fight someone, then it's like, uh-oh, what do I do now? You need a stat block, depending on the system, of course, right? But maybe you need one. Uh, just have a list of generic stat blocks and pick one that fits the most for this situation, for this particular NPC. Maybe add a thing or two, and then done, right? That took you 30 seconds to prepare. In the time everyone is rolling their initiative and kind of counting up everything, you just grab that stat block, and be like, this person has a higher will save, whatever, boom, done, right? And then they're like, I'm done with this. Now, everybody, please tell me your initiative, right? And so on and so forth. Um, Whatever else, you know yourself best, right? There's a whole bunch of things that you can prepare here. Rumor tables. Uh, if your players are really into the more details of playing out certain scenes, a list of drinks and meals at a tavern, right? Um, or whatever, right? You hopefully know your players and your table and your game style best, and also what you are good at to be able to tell what can you prepare. Props are also a thing that you can prepare. Things like images for NPCs, right? Portraits for NPCs and such, or like mood images. You step into this glade, this druid glade, and then you found the perfect image online to evoke exactly the right emotion of what this glade looks like and such, and you just throw that up on the screen, and people are like, "Oh, okay, so this is where we are." Sounds and background music, yes, exactly. Uh, Sounds and BGM, right? And again, you can go as deep as you want to as long as it's enjoyable. You can be like, I want this villain to have this theme music, and then you go find the perfect theme music for it. Or you can just say, I just want some generic fantasy music playing in the background, done, right? Both are fine. Um, It depends on how deep you want to go into it, right? So a lot of these things that you cannot improvise or immediately do at the table, uh, these are things you can prepare beforehand, and these things are useful across games, right? You can build up a library of them essentially. If you run games long enough, um, you might just have a name list that you use again and again, and it might have 500 names on there because you've been using it for 3 years. Awesome, right? That's really, really cool. Um, and or you might have a carefully curated library of sounds and background music and such, and you know exactly where everything is. You don't even need to put playlists anymore. You know exactly the path through the folders, and you know that sound in particular. That's what I want right now. Sure, awesome. Um, but that's stuff you can prepare. Um, and yeah, and this kind of prep, by the way, is not constrained to the single thread story or the sandbox or anything in between. Um, but there are tips, more particular tips that help with things like the single thread story or that help with things like um the sandbox, right? Um, Another thing is like dungeons, for example. That appears quite often, right? If you have the cult, that's kind of location-ish, but maybe a dungeon you may have to prepare more thoroughly, right? You have to key all the rooms, you have to see what's in there, what kind of monsters, random encounters maybe, or all of that things, right? So that is a certain specific thing you may have to prep. Um, but again, you know this is very likely going to appear because at some point in the story, the players are likely going to have to raid this cult outpost, right? Where the ritual is going to take place. Um, so prepping these kinds of things is not saying, okay, now I have to railroad the players to go to the dungeon. It's saying it's very likely this will happen, right? With the way the story is developing, and maybe the players are even talking about it. It's like, oh, we have to find that hideout. We want to know where it is. We've been doing a whole session of research and asking around and exploring for this hideout. Then you know, yeah, I will have to prep this dungeon and it will 99.9% see use, right? And that's really what you want to do. You want to prep things that are very, very likely to see use in actual game and not prep things that are very unlikely to appear or that you know for certain are not going to appear, right? That's if you don't have the time and energy, focus on these sort of things, right? Um, and yeah, and then you update all of these as you play, right? If the players have found certain clues, then you can strike them off the list or mark them somehow saying players have this already. If a certain item was found, then you can write, okay, the players now have this. If an item was destroyed, maybe, right? Then you can mark that down as well, etc., etc. Right? All of these things. Yeah, not preparing several sessions in advance because things can change. Yes. Uh, Obviously, there is a degree of how much detail you can go into. um like getting a very rough background and some major players and a rough timeline, that you can probably do in half an hour, right? Or heck, like we've been sitting here doing this, yeah, not the whole 3 hours, but like just every now and then got some ideas and just toss them together. That takes like half an hour, done, and that can last you a long time. But then for the next session, you may want to prepare certain things. You may want to say, all right, so this NPC is going to appear in this session because the players told me they want to seek this NPC. Let me look at the stat block again for this NPC. Um, or oh, they are trying to look for, I don't know, the leader of the Thieves Guild. I don't have anything on this person yet. Let me prep this NPC. Let me put in some. Who is the Thieves Guild? What is this person? What are their goals, their secrets, their motivations, and so on, right? And then you can prep all of that stuff, but you know that this is going to happen. Um, and yeah, not prepping too many sessions in advance. That is where all of the published adventures usually fall short because they prep an entire campaign all at once which then necessitates you kind of pushing the players in certain directions. They are so evasive, and even the GM doesn't have info on them. Exactly. Exactly. They are a shadow. Um right. I will have to call it around here. Um if there is more interest in this, I can go into more detail of how to prep like single threat versus sandbox, for example, how to avoid things like railroading, go more into running the game. Um but I think this was I hope that this was helpful. It was certainly a lot of fun to talk about this and just spend like an entire stream talking about just this and not about designing for once. I mean, I still love designing, but this is also fun to talk about. So, okay, let me switch to here. Okay, yeah. So, the VOD will be on YouTube. Good to mix it up. Yes, definitely. And it's still the same basic topic, like so much to do here. Um, so I do think I will continue with this a little bit. Uh, and yeah, I hope this is helpful. And yeah, if there are like questions or comments or anything, you feel free to ask. Are we? Hold on. I get to raid someone I have basically never been able to raid, who is an excellent friend. And I hope they're not ending stream right now. I do hope so. Aquapunk. Aquapunk, who is, yeah, like I said, excellent friend, and who's going to do a Diverse Hearts stream. Yeah, okay. A lot to digest. Yes, definitely. And it's also a big shift in like thinking about things, right? But yeah, I do think I will can talk about the same thing next week. All right, so let's say hi to Aquapunk. I never get to say hi to them. Um, which is nagging me. Okay, okay. Let me see that I got the name correct. Aquapunk, yes. Meow? Yes, we're raiding. We're raiding Vitalina. We're ending stream. So, do say hi to Aquapunk. Aquapunk is amazing. It does a lot of awesome art stuff as well. Very chill. Chill and chaotic, which is an awesome combination. And yes, I will have to go out and say hi to my family. So, yeah, thank you all for being here. This was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well. I hope you learned something. I will be back again on Thursday with Baldur's Gate, but I have a lesson in the morning, so I will be slightly later than usual. Uh, so yeah, see you all soon, hopefully. Stay hydrated, take care, and bye bye.